So the iPhone XS just came out. This is actually my 10, but they look exactly the same. And I know there's a million videos out there talking about the specs and all of that. I'm not really here to specifically address that. I actually wanted to share my thoughts on it. Having a little bit of experience working for Apple in the past and seeing a couple things that actually I haven't seen anybody else cover before. I wanted to bring some things up to conversation because I think it's important to notice little things that Apple is actually doing to compete with others and to actually still make this a successful phone, because if you know, the iPhone X was a huge redesign last year. So the fact that the XS came out and it looks almost the same, a lot of people won't buy it, but that's why, you know, they did certain things. So to start off with, I know a lot of you guys probably already heard in the news, Apple released the iPhone XS, which is same size as the iPhone X, the XS Max, which is a little bit bigger, and of course the iPhone XR, which is about $250 cheaper than the XS. And my guess is that the XR will be really popular this year. It's going to be probably more popular than the XS, maybe even the XS Max, but there's not really many people that I see that are going to be upgrading from the iPhone X to the iPhone XS. It is a good change, but just for the price of the phones, even if you're financing it or anything like that. I have the iPhone X. I'm going to be upgrading to the iPhone XS Max. I like the bigger screen ever since the iPhone 6 Plus came out. I actually got the 6 Plus on launch date. I got the iPhone 7 on launch date. I had an iPhone 6s Plus for a certain point because my 6 Plus stopped working. So I've always been a fan of the bigger phones just because bigger battery life, to be honest. That's the biggest thing, and just the fact that as somebody who does a lot with photography, in the past they had better cameras than the regular sized phone, which isn't the case anymore actually. It's really just a screen size and the battery, but I still want to give that a try. I'm actually still really excited for the XR. I originally was not able to choose, and I am still actually gonna see. I pre-ordered the XS Max, but the XR, especially that really nice looking red color, is something that caught my eye. But and I'll talk about in a second why I won't be downgrading and why and it's not a downgrade, you still get better processor, but you're actually compromising in a little bit of other technologies. So something that I wanted to talk about that not a lot of people have noticed is the fact that Apple made these two phones, and yet in the past, usually if they're gonna make a more cost-efficient phone like the iPhone XR, it's gonna have more compromises. And the first thing that caught my eye is the fact that the iPhone XR has basically two lower things than the XS and the XS Max. And those two things are just the build quality, the fact that it's made out of aluminum instead of stainless steel. That's one. And the second part is the dual cameras. That's about it. The size of the XR is actually between the iPhone X and the X Max, or sorry, the XS and the XS Max, but you know, the same X and XS are the same size. So between the regular S and the S Max, essentially, that is the size of which the XR sits. So it's not a smaller phone. It is lower resolution. It's very similar to the older phones like the iPhone 8 Plus, and it has an LCD. So for those of you who don't know, LCDs versus OLED displays, LCDs are, they have a backlight behind them, so they don't have that light, although the light when the screen is black comes through, so you don't get that great contrast, and it's actually slightly less efficient because of the fact that it uses more. For OLED displays, which is what the iPhone XS and the XS Max have, is it can turn off individual pixels. But anyway, I'm sure a lot of you know that. There's a lot of other videos that can cover that. Something that I noticed as well is the types of crowds and the competition that Apple is pushing this out. So the first thing that I thought of when I saw the iPhone XR is the fact that it has all of the bokeh effect and a lot of that software trickery, but it only has one camera. And what other phone does that? The Google Pixel. Now the Google Pixel is probably going to be renewed soon, but I think that it's actually set to compete with it really well. So in terms of people that want an equivalent from Android, you have the two most popular phones that I've seen is the Pixel, at least here in the US. You have the Pixel, and you have all the Samsung Galaxy, the S9, the S9 Plus, and the Note as well. Those just all finally released, and I think they go hand in hand with the S line and the R. The R is very similar in terms of it has the same processor as the S. It has the same camera sensor itself, it just only has one. You get all of the features of Face ID. You get all of the, you don't get 3D touch, but that's very minor. It has a substitute for it. Same, very similar form factor. It's just the display itself has a little bit more bezel, and it has an LCD, which the Google Pixel, now it starts to compare because the Google Pixel itself has those thicker bezels a little bit, so it's not the king of design per se, it's not the most beautiful phone, but it's a really good phone because the software is the main feature. It has one rear camera, but it still has probably the best camera on the market out there. The display itself, it's not a LCD, it is actually OLED, but it's a little bit thicker, and it got a lot of heat when it first came out because if you shifted, it had a little bit more blue shift, so it was considered actually a slightly lower quality display. But it's still a really cheap phone. It markets for, it looks like about $649, so the iPhone XR is going to market for $749. It is a little bit newer, still way more powerful processor, but they go very, very similar because even the Pixel, the build quality is good, it's solid, but it's not that like premium, dense, beautiful feeling that something like the iPhone X or the Notes or the Samsung Galaxy, the S9 or the S9 Plus have. So that's where I would see the iPhone XS or the XS Max actually compare very similarly, and they try to market towards competition with the Samsung phones because they do have that slightly more premium feeling. They have that display, which actually Samsung makes. So they go hand in hand together, and they have that more premium hardware while still performing really well, and they have that slightly more expensive price tag. If you look at something like the Note 9 and the XS Max, they actually in price, they're very similar. The size, they're very similar too. The XS doesn't have that little pen that comes out, but at the same time, they're very similar phones with very similar features. And that's where you get that. Going back to the iPhone XR, that water resistance, the Google Pixel has no water resistance, and the iPhone XR actually has slightly less water resistance. Now that does make it a little bit cheaper, but at the same time, if you're gonna be someone that buys a Google Pixel, the XR actually is the version of the Pixel, just slightly better in all areas, you know? It has water resistance, which the Pixel does not. It's very similar in that price point, just a little bit more expensive. Displays are very similar, a little bit thicker bezels, only one camera, but really good software. So you get all that software features that the newest flagship phone gets, just like Google has been doing. They get slightly reduction in build quality in order to get a better price, which a lot of people look at, versus the crowd that goes for the Samsung phones. They like that really premium feel. They like to have the, you know, essentially the most, probably the most expensive Android phone on the market, and that's where the iPhone XS and the XS Max compete, because they're really going for that luxurious, best possible design with not as much regard for the price, because they know that there's people out there that are going to get it. So that's something that I've noticed that it's actually pretty clever that Apple's been doing, that not many other people have pointed out before. They've just pointed out the fact that Apple has been making two separate phones, but this time it's different because it's different than the iPhone SE, which was the cost-efficient phone in the past. It's different than even something like the iPhone 5C, which did not go very well. It had a lot of failure rates, and it had quite a few issues from what I've seen. And the iPhone XR, instead of making it scaled back with a lot of lesser technology and cheaper technology in a lot of places, it has that same technology. It's just literally the build quality that is just a little bit cheaper, but it gets all that software, and that's the first time Apple's ever done that, where it gets all that software, even to the point where 3D touch gets substituted, because they don't want to put that in the phone to make it as expensive. So they just build it into the software, and that's something where actually it went the other way around. So it's going to be really interesting to see this year how that phone is going to play out. I'm really excited to get my XS Max. I'll be definitely probably making a video on it. If that's something you guys want to see, let me know. And I'm also going to be very attentive to it because it's a pretty big difference in price if you look at the iPhone XS Max. So I have a 10, right? So if you're going from a 10, XS for me honestly isn't enough to switch. XS Max catches my eye. It's different enough where I want to upgrade to it. I have the iPhone upgrade program, so I am eligible to upgrade my phone every year. If I wait a month, I can actually get the iPhone XR, which is still a slightly bigger phone, still faster processor and better camera, better battery life, and it's actually, since it's $750, if I go from my iPhone X to that, I'd be saving $20 a month, which is huge, and I get that cool red color. So it's something that I'm going to keep in mind too, where even if you look at a phone as of the you look at the XS Max and you look at the iPhone XR, even though they're almost close in size, and yes, the XS Max is a better phone, but if you look at it at that point, it's almost twice as expensive. If you get the 500 gigabyte XS Max and you get the entry-level XR, they are almost twice as expensive if you are getting the iPhone XS Max, which they have the same processor. The camera functionality is very similar. It doesn't have that second lens, but as Apple stated, it's going to have very similar amounts in quality. So honestly, it might even be something where I might go for an iPhone 10. I might even return that phone and wait a month, get the iPhone XR, just because it's going to be a lot better and a lot more bang for the buck. So that's something to keep in mind. Definitely let me know what you guys want to see in the future. Let me know if you want to see that video. Let me know if you want to see a video as well for, it's not as popular, but for the 2018 MacBook Pros with the 6 cores. I've been actually trying to get some bench tests going so I can show a little bit of use case as a student and as somebody who does video editing as well. But for the most part, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.